Welcome to Spark Igniters. My name is Nelson, and I'm the founder of the innovation agency weSpark. Spark Igniters is a podcast all about sharing positive, impactful messages, and they all come from inspiring totally extraordinary people. Please follow us and never miss an episode. Now let me introduce you to today's guest. Chris Du is an Emmy Award-winning designer, director, CEO, and chief strategist of the brand strategy design consultancy Blind. Chris is founder of The Future, an online education platform with the mission of teaching 1 billion people how to make a living doing what they love. Hello everybody, we have an amazing person today here. We have Chris Du. You already saw a little bit about what he has done. So I just want to start right away and shoot with the first question. When was the moment that you thought, okay, people need more education. People need to become better professionals, to get new skills, to have the right mindset, and to, just like try to do more things. How do you convince yourself, okay, future, that's the next thing that I'm going to do?
Okay, so your question has many components to it. So first, I'm going to try and break it down. I think we all need better education because education, I think, is the key to us leveling up in our skills, our life. If you want to learn something, you're going to have to be educated on how to do that. Now, that could be done through formal and traditional education like a university, or it could be done via a mentor, or you could self-teach, right? You can teach yourself. And I think that's pretty cool. But in terms of my desire and my passion to teach people the way that I'm doing it today, that ultimately came around 2014. I was teaching at Art Center for 15 years at that point in time. And my friend Jose Caballero was asking me to help him produce videos for YouTube. And I found like this perfect platform to take the things that I've been doing at school and then teaching them online via YouTube. And that's when it all crystallized for me.
Wow, nice. And I was seeing one of your videos, if I am correct, it's called How to Learn Anything for Creatives. And there you mentioned that traditional education might not be as important as we think. To the point that you mentioned how, if I am correct, your younger son, you didn't send him to school like in the last 2 years, and you chose to just teach him at home. So can I ask, why do you believe this? The first question, and then when was the moment that you said, yeah, I believe maybe he can learn better at home? And
Yes, you have that all correct. My youngest son, we pulled him out of private school the last 2 years because of a desire for a couple things. But mostly it was a catalyst that came from him because he would come home and say, I'm bored with school. It's not giving me anything. And so we were looking for alternatives. Now, this is a stark contrast to my oldest son, which is going to a private school on the East Coast. He's going to boarding school. So that I think it's like very important to pay attention to the needs and wants of your children, that one wants something very different than the other and don't apply the same formula. My youngest is really into art and design and cooking. He loves to play video games. And at that point in time, I was traveling a lot. And I thought this would be great if he were a little bit more free to join me on my trips. I don't have any kind of strong plan. But then my wife told me, you can't just pull him out of school and go traveling with you. I think they may arrest us or something like that. So we had to enroll him in an online private school, which is what we did. And so he can get the traditional lessons and what he would learn in a normal school, while I get to fill in the other gaps. And what we learned really quickly is that the amount of work and the things that you can learn in school actually don't require that much time. And there's something that's really cool too about when you're working or learning from home, distance-based learning, because you can stay focused on one subject for as long as you want, or if you're done quickly and you're ready to move on to the next, you could do that. Whereas in school, there's a schedule and a way of doing things, and you can't really break that. So that's how we did it, and it was really nice. I'm sure in a couple of years we'll be able to report back if this whole experiment was helpful to his personal development. But he got to travel to the Philippines with me, to the Netherlands, to New York, to San Francisco, and a couple other places. And it was really great to be able to just to have a travel companion, and for him to be able to sit in the green room with other speakers, to have a front row seat to these wonderful and very powerful, informative talks. What he got from it, I don't know, but at least he got to participate in it.
Wow, yeah, I believe that this sort of exposure can do great things to the mindset that one develops over time. And I have two little questions from deriving from what you were telling. The first one is, I saw in one video explaining your journey and how you started your first company. You mentioned that at least in the university, you really wanted to learn, and you were always, trying to give the best, and you will select the classes that you want to have. But back in school, were you also quite bored, and were always looking for something else to learn during that time?
Are you talking about once I went to university or in high school?
In high school.
In high school, I was bored a lot. I really was. And here's the thing is I had a lot of pressure from my parents to do well in school, like most Asian kids. Grades were everything. And I took classes, of course, that I didn't feel anything towards, but because they looked good on a potential application for college. So I was
Mhm.
taking some high levels of calculus, and I'm not really that interested in math, but I thought that's what you had to do.
Yeah.
And the classes where I had electives, that's where I can select something else right for me, and that's when I was most happy. So I took like metal shop where I could learn how to work with metal and weld. I took yearbook. I took commercial art. Those are things that interested me, and that's where I could apply myself. But even then, I lacked the discipline and the maturity to really focus and give it my all.
Wow, nice. And now to the second question. And so you mentioned that you tried, and going back to your younger son, and that you knew that there were some gaps to be filled. I was just asking myself, which are those gaps that you were talking about, the sort of things that schools do not cover, and that you should learn.
Yeah, and I think this would apply to anybody that's in education at all. The things that they tend not to teach you is a lot of the personal development, the self-awareness, self-confidence. There aren't classes that, as far as I'm aware of, in most schools that teach this kind of stuff. I think it would be good for all students to have some kind of education in terms of financial, like increasing your financial IQ about
Mhm.
how investment works, how profit is made, how currency works, things like that. Some basic things. I think classes on communication, being able to articulate yourself in writing and in speech and design, perhaps, would be very helpful to people.
Here's like a future, but for kids too.
That's what my wife wants to do, so we'll see.
Oh yeah, that will be an interesting project. I mean, by the time that I'm a parent, and if it's going on, and I'm sure that it will. If you start such a project, then I will definitely put my kids there.
Yeah.
I have another question, and it is, so I was checking again at this. I really like this episode, and I'm really involved in. I really think that education needs to continue developing, because we're still, at least in the traditional way of learning, we're still learning the same way that we used to do hundreds of years ago. And I'm super interested in what you will say that is like the most important thing to learn, the most important skill that you can acquire.
The most important skill that you
Yeah.
can acquire is
Yeah.
the ability to learn new things. I know that sounds really weird, but because the world is changing, everything that you've learned or learning right now that comes from a textbook has already been outdated since the moment it was printed, because the world is changing so quickly. So it's important for us to develop critical thinking skills, to be able to research, to find what it is that we're looking for, to be able to parse truth from fiction, and then to form our own opinion about what we learned.
Well, and in order to learn, which, like, to the audience that is watching today, which are your top three tips that you will give? Just how do you teach yourself to learn?
Okay, it starts with being able to form what it is that you want to know in a question that Google understands. Because there's the way that we think, and then there's the way the algorithm thinks, and it's based on collective intelligence, right? So
Mhm.
if millions of people are asking a question one way and you're asking the question a different way, you may not be able to find it. But as you can see, one thing that I would say is if you're not sure what to ask, to slowly type in your question into Google because of this thing called predictive text. As you're typing it
Mhm.
in, it can almost read your mind. And instead of typing in what you want, just let it do its thing. And then other results will show up. So that's the first step, to be able to form the question, to be able to articulate it in a way that the machine understands, and then go through what the relevant results are to be able to compare and contrast what you think might be helpful. Now, oftentimes, if you're like me, the first thing that pops up, the highest ranked thing on Google, tends to be the right thing, but not always. And if you click on that and you discover that's not very good, skip down to the second, third, fourth, and just keep going down that list until you find what it is that you want. Inherently, what happens usually is inside of that the article or the video that you see is the thing that you are looking for. So then start the search query again. Rephrase the search so it's now more precise. You just got a little bit smarter on how to ask the question. So learning how to ask the question is very important. And then being able to do comparative analysis, looking between A and B and seeing like, okay, this is better than this. This is more nuanced than that. This is going deeper than this. And then being able to take that and then going down the rabbit hole.
So we could sum it up that, so you will go into Google, just try to find out how most of the people will ask this.
Mm-hmm.
And then, with the post that you're opening, you're trying to learn the language or the right, maybe the right terminology that you were looking for at the very beginning to re-ask the question and possibly end on the answer. Okay, that's super interesting. I really enjoy how, you take a complex thing and just segment it into little bites that are easy to understand and that are so, visual. So there, I really like that. Do you think that's a skill that,
Oh,
like,
thanks.
how do you acquire that skill?
I think that comes just mostly from curiosity. And if you really want to know something, you're going to go and figure it out. I'll give you an example. My son is into games and he's into whatever supports his gaming experience. So in terms of figuring out how to, like what the best, most precise mouse is or the most responsive keyboard for gamers, he's looking into optimizing our Wi-Fi connection because his corner of the house, it's a little bit slow. So he looked into mesh networks and I told him to watch some videos and then he added it to the cart. These are all things he's motivated to learn. He'll figure it out. He also figured out how to upgrade his motherboard for a PC that he was building. And then he ordered all the parts and read the instructions. And with a little help from me and some guidance, we were able to do it together. Now he's motivated to learn that. So that makes a lot of sense. To my wife who's looking at this, she would say like, that's very complicated and hard and difficult. And she has zero interest in doing any of that. Let's contrast it with something else. If I tell my son, hey, I want you to go and clean up these boxes downstairs, he'll just do one thing and then stop. He's not looking for the next thing because he's not really motivated to learn or to be better at cleaning up boxes inside the house. You see how that motivation, that curiosity works, right? So the key here is to be more curious about more things and then let your curiosity lead you down those paths.
That actually takes me to another question. So do you think that curiosity is something that we are born with, something that we develop, and maybe let's forget that part and go more into, if there's somebody that is now 40 years old and this person for some reason is trying to find a cause, change their position, change the job, do you think that you can develop curiosity when you are already grown up, so as to say?
I sure hope so, because I'm still curious and I'm about to hit 50 pretty soon. So I sure hope so for my sake. I think curiosity is pretty innate within all of us. I think some of it gets coached out of us by parents and other people, that when you keep asking like, why? And eventually your parents are going to lose their cool and say, stop asking me why. Or what happens in classes, right? When the teacher's talking about something, the teacher has a plan and they have an agenda and they want to keep moving forward. But if you're stuck, you might shoot up your hand. And if you raise your hand and the teacher starts to ignore you or to punish you for raising your hand because you're interrupting their flow, that can be problematic. So these lessons that we can, these little, somebody told me this before, children are very good at observing, but they're very poor at interpreting. So they can observe that something bad is happening when they raise their hand. So they interpret the story, not in that the teacher may not be a great teacher, or your parent might just be a little tired today and your line of questioning isn't helpful for them in that moment. But our interpretation is stop asking questions. And so the curiosity gets beat out of us.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, it's super interesting. Sometimes I will even go and say that for people, I guess like us and a lot of the people that are watching this video right now, curiosity is a given thing. They were kind of born with it. Where they grew up, they always were more curious, and they are now, watching videos online, trying to acquire new skills, trying to acquire new perspectives. And it's really difficult to think that there are people out there that don't have this. I mean, and it's more difficult to put themselves in their position. So let's assume that there are at least some people here that have enough curiosity to hear more. What would you suggest them? How can they, like start growing that curiosity that they are lacking right now?
Yeah, okay, very good question. So I was thinking about this, that there's a Jim Rohn quote. It says something like, "You are the sum of the five people that, or you're the average of the five people you spend the most time with." So if we're around people that aren't curious, that are negative in terms of responding to curiosity, then those are behaviors and attitudes and opinions that we adopt ourselves. So the first thing is to surround yourself with people that are more like the people like that you would like to be like, right? So be around more aspirational people. If you want to learn about marketing, be around marketing people. If you want to learn more about design, be around more designers. And that's kind of how it works. So if you can join groups or forums or meetups, I mean, pre-COVID meetups, right? And you can hang out with people. And then all of a sudden you start to adopt their language, their behaviors, their opinions and attitudes. And it moves you away from that place of where you were to where you want to be. So the first thing is to surround yourself with people who are curious, and let that infect you. Let that spread through your body, through your mind, and through your spirit. And then you'll start to learn that this is not a bad thing. It's actually a very good thing. And so that you can learn new skills.
Yeah, I believe in Spanish we have a saying that says, el que entre miel anda, algo se le pega, which translates to English like, if you're walking through honey, something's going to stick to you. So, it really goes well with this example that you say, like if you expose yourself to people that know how to do what you want to learn, then you might, also get irritated and be exposed enough time to inspire yourself to change in that direction. So that's super nice. Okay, Chris, I just have a last question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Before I'm going to take this Google part and trying to find the right question, let's assume that today, around the topic education and teaching yourself, I didn't find the right question to ask you. Because there might be a message, and for me, it's super difficult to get inside of your head. I was trying to read every single piece of text that there's about you, check every video, but still, it's impossible for me to know which message is the one that you are right now trying to spread to everybody. So, which question did you forget to ask, and what would be your answer or message?
Wow. Okay, so I want to just say that you have done a lot of research. I can tell because you watch videos and you're referencing things. And sometimes as an interviewer, you can get lost in that to say like, well, this has already been talked about. But I would encourage you just to forget that you're on a show, that there are other people listening, and just have a conversation with me as if we're having coffee or tea together. And you're like, hey, I'm just like, why are you wearing that? Or like, I saw a look in your eye and you said this thing, and I wonder what it is that you were thinking. That's usually the best way to have a conversation, right?
Yeah,
And
true that. Yeah.
so for me right now, I'm going to ask you the question right back. So if you could take that advice, forget everything else. What's on your mind? Like, what do you want to ask? What is it that you want to know that maybe I've said or haven't said that would provide value to you?
Okay, perfect. So what I'm trying to find, respond a question with another question. That's what my question was easier, Chris. The one that you made is super difficult. No, but getting serious again, serious enough.
Yeah.
I just want to try to find out what is the potential message that you could share that will give the most value to anybody listening and watching this video.
Okay.
And it's completely open.
Yeah, it's a very open and broad question. So sometimes the design of the question leads the person that you're talking to down a path. So I don't know that enough about what everybody needs, but I can share something that might make a little bit more sense for your audience. Okay. We're
Perfect.
talking about learning. We're talking about information. And we live in this wonderful time where anything that we want to know is available to us via a quick search on Google. We know that. And that's really incredible to be living in this time. But then there are people who are just not where they want to be. They're depressed, or they have roadblocks that have been put in front of them, or they put in front of themselves. And they keep saying, if I only knew this one thing, if somebody had told me this, it would change my life. So if you had searched that answer would already be there. So there's not a shortage of information out in the world. There's just a shortage of learning and a willingness to learn. So I think it all comes down to a mindset. Because if you want to learn how to price projects, if you want to learn how to negotiate or do sales or do ClickFunnels or marketing or lead pages, all that information is available already right now for free or for very little money. So you have to ask yourself, why haven't you learned it yet? If this is something that you want, Yoda says, try or try not, or what did he say? Do or do not. There is no try. Like there is no want. So if you want to do something, I want to have this thing, what's holding you back? What is your biggest roadblock? And to really go inside of your mind and ask yourself that question, like, why haven't I done that yet? And oftentimes, this is sad, this is kind of me giving a little tough love here, is that people say they want because it makes them feel better. People say they want because then it lets other people know that they are more aspirational than what they have right now. But it's oftentimes just said in empty ways, because if you want something, why aren't you doing it? Now, there are real limitations and constraints for some things. Like if I want to be a basketball player, obviously that's going to be very difficult for me as a person who's 5'8" without like being able to jump 44 inches or something like that. But in
Yeah.
terms of things that you can do, things that you can learn, things that you can share with others, it's just really about taking action. So you have to start to adopt this attitude that whatever I say I want, I must do. Otherwise, I'm not allowed to say that I want it.
Perfect. I couldn't have put it in such a beautiful, structured manner. I really like it. Thank you very much, Chris, for your time, and I hope that we can spread this message and that a lot of people will be super inspired. So thanks a lot, Chris, and yeah, hope to see you again next time.
Okay, thanks very much.